Item 12. This is, again, National Policy Statement Urban Development. It's about the well-functioning urban environment, responsiveness, and ensuring there's significant development capacity. Now, today we're only discussing the possible endorsement of our policy approach to implementing those things. There's work to do. We welcome to the table John Dogood, General Manager of Plans and Places, and Erin Shields, our team leader on planning. Now, we've got motions that will go up shortly after this, and I'll move, and the Deputy Chair will second. Deputy Chair to second. They will go up shortly, but we'll take the presentation first, and I will go to John Dogood.
Tēnā koutou, members of the Planning Committee. So, as Megan mentioned earlier on, this is the first of the two direction-setting papers on the NPS urban development, having heard from Jacques and the team on the housing and business assessment, factual information. So we're seeking your direction on a number of matters in this paper and the next one to really kick the work off on responding to the NPS urban development with a view to meet the requirement to amend the Auckland Unitary Plan. The first report deals with potential changes to the regional policy statement. That's the sort of front end of the Unitary Plan where the big picture policy is set. And then the second report deals with potential changes to the district plan provisions, which is things like the zoning and the overlays and the specific rules for development. So Erin will shortly run through a presentation, but just to very quickly recap, the overarching objective of the National Policy Statement on Urban Development is that New Zealand has well-functioning urban environments that enable all people and communities to provide for their social, economic and cultural well-being and for their health and safety now and into the future. So this concept of well-functioning urban environment is what all of the policy and the directions in the NPS hang off. So the report describes some work that we've undertaken, and we have workshopped this concept of well-functioning urban environment with you, and the results of the analysis that we've done in terms of the potential gaps between the NPS definition of what a well-functioning urban environment might be and what Auckland Council might feel or believe the attributes of a well-functioning urban environment are. So that's the first part of the report. We then go on to talk about an aspect of the NPS urban development that requires councils, not just Auckland Council, but all councils to be responsive to private plan change requests. So private landowners, developers wanting to change, in this case, the unitary plan to enable something that's essentially not in line with the development strategy in the Auckland plan in this context. So to do something that's potentially outside the urban boundary, possibly inside the urban boundary, but not in sequence with the timing that we've set out in the Auckland plan. Or it could be in the existing urban area, but it's something that's really not anticipated. So it might be on a piece of land that has never been anticipated for something of perhaps high density mixed use. It's been a lower density area, and someone is seeking to rezone that land. And so the NPS urban development requires the council to be responsive to those types of proposals, but only where they meet criteria that the council is able to set and put into the regional policy statement. So that's the topic that we're really honing in on today, is that latter one around being responsive to those types of out-of-sequence, unplanned proposals and setting the criteria. So I'll hand over to Erin to run through that in a bit more detail, and then we'll take some questions. Thanks.
Erin.
Thank you, John. Tēnā koutou katoa, Mr. Chair, Mr. Mayor, councillors and IMSB members. By way of introduction, I'm Erin Shields. I'm a team leader in the Northwest Planning Unit. So today I have 6 slides to go through. I'm pleased to say that they're not quite as detailed as the housing and business assessment slides. So if I could go to the first one, thanks. The first policy in the National Policy Statement requires all councils to plan for growth and to ensure the delivery of a well-functioning urban environment. This is a clear overarching policy umbrella for the whole of the NPS, and that applies for all peoples, all communities, and importantly for the future generations. What we have done in terms of analysing the Council's response to this is we've looked through the regional policy statement, and in particular Part B 2.3, and we were pleased to be able to identify that that part of the regional policy statement covers the matters that the national policy statement seeks. In a way that's not surprising, because the government, in setting national requirements for well-functioning urban environments, have gone at a very high level. Through the development of the unitary plan, we have put all of those elements into the Auckland context, and so we have a significant number of policies on matters that are not specifically identified in the national policy statement, but nevertheless do contribute to a well-functioning urban environment. What that means is that we don't need to make a lot of changes to the RPS at this point, but I'll now go to the next slide, if I may. There is one MPS matter that is less well covered, and that is the government's intention for us to support reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. There's currently no policy on this in the RPS, and that is because at the time when the unitary plan was developed, the Resource Management Act did not require us or make us to attend to this matter in our resource management framework. The government has included this into the process, and so we see a clear need to introduce at least one new policy about greenhouse gas reductions. Importantly, the RPS is not silent on climate change, and climate change, as you know, is what we see as the effects of greenhouse gas emissions. So think of coastal erosion, coastal inundation, more severe weather events, etc. But there isn't much in the RPS about greenhouse gas reductions. So we're asking and making a recommendation that this committee notes that there are no major changes to the RPS other than for reducing greenhouse gas emissions. That will need to come forward in more detail in terms of the exact text, and we will need to look through the rest of the unitary plan to see if there are consequential changes to give effect to that particular policy. So that will come back to you once we've done that work. The second aspect of the report today is about, and I'll start with the idea of significant development capacity. As John has said, we need to provide sufficient development capacity to meet expected demand for housing and business land over the short, medium and long terms. Housing capacity can also be located in both existing and new areas, and so that's the existing urban environment as we know it, the future urban land, and potentially outside of the rural-urban boundary. To be considered to be development capacity, it must be plan-enabled, i.e. provided for in the plan, infrastructure ready, it must be feasible, and you've heard a bit from Chad and Mario about that already. It's reasonably expected to be realised, and we think that is that the proponent of that capacity can actually deliver, meet expected demand, and support choice and competitiveness in the housing and business land markets. So the government hasn't left it open as to what significant development capacity might be. In the MPS, it has given us this useful guidance. Next slide, thanks. Alongside this is Policy 8, and this requires Council to be responsive to private plan changes that seek to supply significant development capacity. And I must hasten to say that Council is already being and has always been responsive to private plan changes, and as a committee you will have seen many of those come before you for your consideration. Nevertheless, we must include criteria in the RPS that defines what significant is, and so we have worked on that matter and have identified some areas that we need to go away and give more precision to and develop a plan change for. And so we've identified those in the report. Ultimately, what the policy goal for this is to enable more development to occur more quickly and where it has not necessarily been contemplated before. Next slide, thanks, Kalinda. And so in terms of the recommendations, we've developed a list that you'll be very interested in. And this is not the criteria themselves, they are summaries of what the words might be. So please be careful to ensure that these are not considered to be the actual words that go into the RPS. That will come before you in a few months' time. And there is 8 items: strategic alignment, scale of proposed development, location of proposed development, timing of proposed development, bulk and local infrastructure funding and financing. Proposed development is well connected to transport networks and Three Waters infrastructure. It supports a well-functioning urban environment, which brings us back to where I started today. And we've identified some exceptions where proposed development provides for one or more of the following, and those are for papakainga, for affordable housing, and for social housing. So those are the areas that we appreciate you resolving for us to go away and do further work and bring a plan change back to the committee for approval to notify. I don't know if we need to see this. I've got the definition of well-functioning urban environment up if any of the committee members were interested in that.
I think we can leave that for a moment
Sure.
and read that. Don't think it needs explanation at this point. Let's take some questions now, starting with Councillor Dalton.
Thank you. Is it possible, or even likely, when you go back to look at the unitary plan in the context of the addition of reducing the greenhouse gas emissions, that we could expect plan changes that will downzone locations in the suburban areas that aren't well serviced by public transport until there's an affordable and accessible carbon neutral alternative fuel source?
Thank you for that. Through the chair, we have another item that is coming forward to this committee next month, which it relates to the approach to intensification everywhere else other than in the walkable catchments. And the requirements that we need to meet in that is based on demand or accessibility. And so, in theory at least, the matter that you may raise might occur. But we've yet to do that work, really.
Thank you, Erin. And Councillor Hills, please.
Just a brief question based on also Councillor Dalton's point. Could we change or add to F? Should it say connectivity to public transport and active mode or networks or something? Because just connecting to a transport network is much like Milldale, which is connected to a motorway with 0 public transport. So if we think about well-functioning, I don't know, Chair, if that's possible, but when we keep saying transport networks, it doesn't include, it's not pointing out public transport.
Through the chair, if I may add, it's possibly my assumed words there, that transport networks in its widest, but we could certainly bring those other suggestions forward.
Yeah, if I can come in there too, and thanks, Councillor Hills. We discussed that at the agenda run-through, actually, and there was agreement that that was the intention, and my apology, I forgot to tidy it up, and that's how it should read, so thanks for spotting that. But it is different to what the members have read in the paper. So can we just go through, if you just don't mind for a minute, Erin, if we could just go through that possible change. Can we put it up in the red, and I just need to make sure that everybody's comfortable with it, and they will. And then, John, on the 4, we've had a discussion about the H4 today. I need to get the official viewpoint on the value of accommodating those words, please. Do you have some feedback for us?
Certainly, Mr. Chair. So we would support that amendment. So what H is doing is saying that there may be some cases where council will be responsive to a proposal that's putting significant development capacity forward that doesn't necessarily meet A to G, and those are some examples. And so we've heard a lot of discussion today around innovative housing options such as progressive home ownership, build to rent, and so on. So that would provide a proposal of that nature the opportunity to potentially be in a location that might not be the most ideal location, but it would give the flexibility to at least consider that and have the benefit of the responsive policies of the MPS. So, yeah, we would support that being added to the list. And as we work things through, there could potentially be other exceptions.
So I think it's important to remember this is a policy direction. We're not dealing with the plan change content at this point, and there's work to do, which we will all be abreast of as we travel towards that end point of a notification of a plan change. Yeah. Okay, so at the moment, there's still more work to do in this area. This is indicating the direction, policy direction. Councillor Cooper.
I was just adding to that, if we're supposed to be the earlier piece of work about delivering the policy around greenhouse gas emissions, then wouldn't then the public transport thing fit in with that? I do support Councillor Hills on that, but we've been told we can't do that, is that right?
John, can I have your reply?
No, we would also support the addition of public transport and active modes, and that is consistent language with the NPSUD itself. So that amendment F in red there, public transport and active modes, has a greater consistency with what the government is intending here than just to broadly say transport, which could be a nearby motorway or arterial with no public transport. Yep.
And just another question, sorry. So actually, some of this then would make it harder to do plan changes than some of the stuff we've done before. We're letting stuff go through that doesn't have that. And so it's almost opposite to what we're supposed to be doing, but I'm happy. I only want to deliver stuff that people can move around.
Yeah, through the chair, if I may just respond to that we are charged with the responsibility of implementing the MPS, and so we are very conscious of that matter. Thank you, Councillor Cooper. Oh no, that's, and so we do not want to establish a set of criteria that are impossible, and so that will be a level of scrutiny that we'll provide once we are clearer about exactly the nature and extent of A to H.
Thank you, Erin. And thank you, Councillor Cooper. And now I will go to Councillor Casey.
It's just the usual request, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to see the word accessible in there. Where we have the word affordable, can we always put accessible before it? Please?
Sorry, which part? Where?
You could do it there, under 2.
Under 2, affordable. So you're talking...
So it's not just about housing types. This is what we should be doing. We should be building accessible houses, full stop.
I'm happy to accommodate affordable and accessible housing. Are they your words, Councillor?
Yep.
Is there so it's consistent with our approach to government, requesting them to look at universal access, accessibility, universal access, same thing. Are there other points of view, please? Well, we've already decided on that, actually. So it is consistent with our current position. Councillor Mulholland.
Thank you, Chair. Not sure if this is a silly question. I hope not. Lovely to see you, Erin. Tiny housing?
I think. Look, I think if we add that, we're getting into a level of detail. We're getting into a typology of housing. Then we can discuss that when we next, John.
Well, surely it's covered by innovative housing models.
It is, yes, of course. Okay, the words are there. Members, Councillor Sayers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just with regard to F and connectivity to public transport networks and active modes, I just think of the Rodney example, there could be other examples where there are extensive greenway plans, but they're not built yet. A development could be, and Milldale's probably a good example, it could be built to take public transport, which this one isn't, but the public transport services aren't in existence. So it's just clarification. Do they have to be existing, or can they be planned? Just what would be our interpretation there?
Yeah, through the chair. The MPS attends to both existing and planned infrastructure. So yes, you're correct in that. How that might appear in the final criteria, we've still got a bit of work to do in terms of the wording. But yes, it's already provided for as part of the MPS.
Yeah, good point, and we can explore that when we get into the detail of it. Councillor Walker?
In point 22 of the report, it mentions a number of things where further work is required to understand how they maybe or could be addressed through other council plans and policies, and that includes water-sensitive design, ecosystem services, health impact assessments, and so on. We've also got the other matters that the unitary plan covers off around view shafts and obviously heritage and the like. Are those things covered off under strategic alignment?
That was the intention of strategic alignment, was to really hone in on those core parts of the regional policy statement that an out-of-sequence unplanned development would clearly be contrary to. So it is those sort of factors. And again, that's the further work we have to do to refine what strategic alignment might mean. And there is a point at which we probably can't go too far, as Aaron mentioned. You know, we couldn't go so far with these criteria that we're actually undermining the intent of this part of the NPS. But yeah, it is those sort of things that potentially are within the scope of strategic alignment.
So just with respect to that, Mr. Chair, so long as that understanding is there, I wouldn't want to vote for this if strategic alignment would otherwise not be covering off those things.
I didn't hear that. I did not, sorry, I could not hear that comment. Was that a comment or a further question?
I'm really just interested in getting some assurance from the officers that strategic alignment is going to be worked on and cover a number of things that are integral to the existing unitary plan.
Yep, it's there. It's there for us to look at, like 8H and under H, those 4 points. So all of that will be looked at. We'll be exploring all of those categories. Councillor Coombe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a clarification, and I think Councillor Casey agrees with me on this, is that under H, if you put accessible with affordable, it means that those are an and rather than an or, and they're all meant to be exceptions. So I think accessible needs to be a separate point, not only tied to affordable, because you might want it to be accessible and social, or innovative and accessible. And presumably, it'd be good just to get officer advice around, there are rules already around universal design in terms of well-functioning environment.
Got it. Sorry, got it. Look, don't want to wordsmith this to death, but so this is actually going forward. It's directing the staff to do the next body of work, and you'll be doing it with us. But do we need to separate it now, or do you understand what it means? That's the most important thing.
We understand, and you will have another opportunity as the draft plan change comes forward. So we proceed on the basis of it being two separate points, but it's a fairly minor change to make. But either way, it's in your hands, Chair. But we understand and we agree with exactly what Councillor Coombe has said.
Yeah, I think
I do.
We would all agree. Okay, it's dropped out. Okay, good. And Okay, John, just when I read this I was just a little bit concerned that if you came in and applied for one of affordable housing, social housing, Māori housing, then you have relief on A through to G, but that's not necessarily the case, is it? It's you might be successful in getting relief on an A or a G or a B in full or part, but there's no suggestion there that if you offer social housing, then you get relief from A to G.
That's correct. That's the intention, and I guess that comes down to how carefully we craft the criteria and the policy that would go into the RPS as part of this plan change that we'll come back to. But that will be part of the skill and I guess the crafting of these criteria is that ability to have these exceptions. And is it to all of the above or just some of the above? And there's a complexity in there, but it wasn't intended that it would be a blanket exception to everything. That's probably unlikely.
Right. No, it's not perfectly worded, but the reason I'm raising it, Mayor, is to make it really clear that we all understand now that it is not the intent to give full relief. Do you need to, Mayor, would you like to make sure the wording is tighter now?
Yeah, I think when you say exception, it means you've got to follow these except in these cases. So I don't think it's what we understand, it's what the wording actually says that's important, because that is what will be binding at a later date. So, I'm not sure what the wording might be, but I think you've got to use a word other than exceptions. Just say, notwithstanding the above, account should also be taken, something like that.
We'll leave it with the Chief of Strategy.
I think maybe if the Chief of Strategy can work around that.
Refine that. We'll tidy that up, because the way I read it is as the Mayor read it, and I think a lot of others might read it that way as well. So it's not just for our benefit, it's for the people of Auckland who might read this as well. Are there other comments on this while we're waiting for that to be finalised, members? There being none, we'll just take a moment and we'll deal with that before we put it to the vote and move on.
Yes, could you please?
Councillor Filipaina, if you think of the quorum.
Chair, I thought because this is your committee, you should sing a song for us.
Apology to the members that are online. We're just refining the words for these motions that are before us, and we'll be back with you very shortly. It'll just be a matter of a minute. Members, we're going to take a 5-minute break and we will come back. What's that, 3:50? be comfortable with that? Don't wait. Okay. Are members comfortable for me to now put the motion? Yes. It is moved and seconded. Okay, we'll come back to the F. You're looking at the F. What we were just angsting over there was the H, and you've got the changes in H4.5. It is moved. It is seconded. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Thank you, John, and thank you, Erin. But